Are you ready to up your short story game? Stay tuned.
Incoming customer detected.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ira Robinson, and I am an author of over a dozen books and many dozens of short stories published. And I wanted to do this video today because I get asked questions a lot as far as short stories go. How do you do it? What do you do with them? And yeah, I think that you guys will really enjoy this. So, you want to be a short story writer? Well, that's laudable. I have written hundreds of short stories and I've published dozens. It can be a lot of fun, for sure. And I love being able to do the short, concise stories that come with that kind of format when compared to doing novels. Novels take a lot of time and preparation to make them work, whereas a short story can be done in a, short period of time. It's not as long of a term of commitment. Most people who write novels think that they can just put out a short story and be done with it, but find the process isn't quite as easy as they might have thought when starting out. Short story writing isn't too difficult on the surface. After all, if you have a plot line or an idea, it's got to be easy to just jot it down and there's your story, right? Well, the problem is short stories are sort of an animal in and of themselves. With novels, you have time to grow the characters, to feed in descriptions and paint the world with your purple prose. A classic short story, in the best sense though, doesn't have that time or luxury, especially with things today where consumption is key and you have to grab the readers quickly. You have to figure out the certain keys that make a short story not only workable, but sellable. I figured since I've done so many of them myself, I'd give you 12 helpful tips to get you going when it comes to these small stories. So, you ready? Tip number 1, figure out your reasons. The first question that you really should ask yourself is this: why do I want to do this? Not whether or not you can, but what is the reason? Now, like I said before, writing short stories is on the surface seemingly easy, but in order to make it truly consumable, you have to make sure a lot of factors are in place that will not only attract the readers, but keep them reading throughout the rest of the paragraphs. Some writers of short stories, like me, use them as a loss leader. We write them, and many do get published for free on our websites or Reddit or Facebook, Instagram, that sort of thing, as a way of attracting readers to our paid content. Bring the reader to the website, show them the free content, get them addicted, and they can explore from there the rest of the books that you have for sale. Or another trick is to use them as an attraction for your newsletters, where the real marketing and sales can be done. Oh wait, you don't have a newsletter? More on that in another video. Other authors use them for cash. Short stories are, when done well, extremely valuable pieces of property. They are an asset, really, no different than your car or the deed to your house. They're property, and you can make money by selling them outright. Now, I'll get more into that in another video as well. Maybe you want to write a short story that is sort of a side tale from your novels or your series. Now, that too is a great way to go because it's going to attract readers into the bigger worlds that you've created, and trust me, your fans are going to love it. Once you figure out your why, you'll find the writing process is actually a bit easier. Tip number 2, hit them from the start. A long time ago, I got some advice from Stephen King. He said when asked what he thought the most important part of the story was, that the first words were the key. You have to hit them hard from the first line. Now, this is very true for novels, and it's even more so for short stories. You have an extremely limited amount of space and time to lock your readers into what you're trying to convey. And unfortunately, in most cases, that means the very first line. Once upon a time no longer really works. The barrel of the gun shook as Tony struggled to breathe. Would be a good hook. Whose gun? Who's holding it? Who the hell is Tony? Instantly, the reader's mind is latched and it's willing for the next few moments at least to give your words the benefit of the doubt to continue reading. Tip number 3, story structure is still important. Now, as authors, we understand the importance of story structure in novels, but short fiction still has to have a structure as well. There has to be a beginning, a middle, and an end of the arc that you're leading the readers through. And you have to satisfy each of those needs in order for them to walk away happy, or sad, or horrified, or whatever emotion you're trying to lead them to feel. Again, when you're able to work with upwards of 100,000 words, that's not hard to do. Constraining it into 1,500 to 3,000 words, well, that's tough to get pinned down. You have to be concise with your words. You have to be choosy on your descriptions. Is it really important that the girl had blonde hair and was built like a bombshell? If it's relevant to the story, then describe it. Use that word count to bring the character a bit to a fuller light. But if it's just a woman in the story and the fact that she's a blonde bombshell doesn't really enter into what's going on in the narrative, then skip it. Let the reader's theater of the mind create what she looks like for you. The same goes for every other part of the narrative. Does it matter that the street is filled with vendors shouting their wares? Perhaps. But can you get by describing that in 100 words or less? Likely so. Unless it's important to the story, skip the purple prose and dig deeper into what's actually going on with the plot. Have the arc in place and know where you're leading the readers. They'll thank you for the journey if you've hit the triggers. Tip number 4, going deeper into the arc. Drop your main character into the thick of the action. If it's a thriller, put the main character right into the trouble spot. We don't need to know their life story from the get-go, or that his grandma used to bake cookies for him when he was sad, unless that's the relevant part of the story that you're dropping the reader into. If it's a romance, it's the same idea. The date's gone wrong and she's got to figure out how to extricate herself. You get it? You hook them in, again, with that first line, and you make it seem like it's everything. Because it is. After introducing the character and the events taking place, then you can structure it, again, with the standard story arc situation. They're in trouble. Everything that they try to do to remove themselves from it fails. They might even make things worse. Things get hopeless. And finally, something happens to allow them to win the day, or not, as the case of the story demands. That's the most basic elemental plot structure that you can get, and it works especially well with short fiction. Tip number 5, hit the reader where it hurts. In short stories, the more primal the emotiveness of the characters and the situations, the better. Readers are humans. They know what the basic emotions feel like, and you can use that to your advantage. It's one of the greatest assets that you have, and being able to tap into that primal soup of feelings can make or break a story. Don't just say they're mad. Show it. Make the reader feel it too. Tip number 6, when in doubt, leave it out. This again goes into the idea that you have a limited amount of space and a short amount of time to make everything happen. Tropes are a thing because they work. They are, like emotions, primal. Readers instinctively understand the common tropes, and you can make use of those to shore up the length of the story. In fact, if you don't have tropes in your story, it's more likely to not be successful. I know. Everybody wants to be unique. They want to do things so radically different so that they can be considered the outsiders of the genre. And that's fine, but don't expect to sell any of those to the common magazines, and don't expect your readers to respond in the way that you hope for. There's a place for niche, but this all leads back to the first tip, asking yourself why. If you want to be that outside voice and probably never have anybody read a thing that you write, that's fine. Go for it and good luck to you. But if you want to actually be successful with it, you have to at least touch on the common threads. They're common for a reason. They work. It's fine to be ultra with the parts of your story and still be a little bit different, given your own twist into the gut, so to speak. Different is good. It does have its place, but you have to give your readers enough of a common idea to work with so that they have a basis of understanding of what you're trying to do. Twisting the trope of wizards in the real world to become wizards in a science fiction universe is different, and it's going to attract people. Writing a story from the perspective of a vase sitting on a shelf is probably not going to go very far unless there's something more to it. Maybe the vase was witness to some horrible events and wants to tell its side of things. Maybe the vase is happy that it was used on a special occasion and it's telling the teacup sitting next to it about what happened. That'd probably be a good story. But taking 1,500 words to just describe the vase sitting on the shelf is probably not going to go very far. Tip number 7, read a lot of short stories. Writers really should be the readers first. They should have an understanding intimately of how story structure works, how to twist words in a certain way to make descriptions complex and concise and hard-hitting. You can get that through trial and error, but really, the best way to learn is by reading the works of others. Why climb the mountain by creating your own pathway and struggling the whole time when you can read what others have done before you and get a good idea of what can work and what doesn't? See, I don't mean read only good stories. That's important, of course, but read short stories that aren't that great too, so that you can get a baseline of what failed. Believe me, you can find both great and bad stories everywhere. It's not that hard. Tip number 8, titles are just as important as the first words. In fact, they are the first words, really. If your title doesn't grab the reader's eye, they're not going to open the pages, or they'll skip through them in a magazine before you have a chance to do anything. Mull over the choices that you make when creating titles for the stories, because they give the first glimpse into what the story might be about. Tip number 9, what is your market? This does tie in a bit with the why question, but it's still important enough to warrant having its own category. It's not a bad idea to have in mind the market that you're writing to, and I don't necessarily mean readers with this one. Magazines, e-zines, newspapers, anthologies, they all have their own submission requirements, including word count, story structure, themes, and so on. It can be helpful to know you're writing for a specific market and twist your plot to fit whatever that market may be. You'll get more yeses than nos when doing things this way and feel that sting of the rejection letter a little less often. Tip number 10, end your story with a whack. Ernest Hemingway wrote one of the greatest short stories, and he did it in 6 words. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Nothing more, nothing less. 6 words that hit with a massive emotion and cut deep. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about by ending your story with a whack. Whose shoes were they supposed to be? What happened to the baby? Was it even born? So many things come crashing into the theater of the mind for the reader of those words, and he didn't even have to elaborate more than that. Short stories are like that. They can leave the reader with such a deep impression in a short period of time that it's hard for them to process it first. They have to mull it, to consider it, to fill in those blank spots. Tip number 11, edit, edit, edit. Now, I'll admit this. Editing is the bane of my existence. I think it's due to my blindness. Whenever I do anything on the computer, I have to lean in, squint really hard, and endure a lot of pain. So not only do I have to edit, cut words, chop my poor characters to bits, while also killing my darling words, I also go through a lot of agony. I hate it. Hate it. But I do it because it's something that we all need to do. Even those who can afford a good editor know that they have to make it at least legible before they send it off. Now, sure, I suppose they could send it into the editor with typos, misprints, errors in structure, and all that stuff, and the editor will probably gladly accept the larger chunk of cash that's going to come with having to go through that kind of mess. They're willing, but it is spendy, and frankly, most short stories don't earn enough money to warrant doling out the large amount of money that would come with paying a great editor to do that kind of thing. You're going to have to learn to do some or perhaps all of the legwork when it comes to editing. Just grin and bear it. We all do. And finally, tip number 12. Some things do not matter. I've put out a lot of books and even more short stories. When I get in the chronic writer's mode, I can pump out 6,000 to 7,000 words a day for a lot of days straight. That's a lot of material, but that's one of the things that doesn't really matter. How many words per day you can do doesn't really matter in the long run because it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. If you're putting out 500 good usable words per day, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You could finish up a short story of standard length within a day or 3. The software that you use also doesn't matter. Now, personally, I use Scrivener and I use Microsoft Word combined, using Scrivener to put everything into a coherent whole and track the end product, and Word to do grammar checking and so forth. I also use Pro Writing Aid to assist me in ensuring that the grammar in my stories is correct, that there's no spelling mistakes. It's sort of a good backup. And Pro Writing Aid is actually a very useful tool that I highly recommend. But none of those things really matter. For years, I used nothing more than a typewriter and a ream of paper that I got on the cheap from Office Depot, and that was just fine. I wrote a lot of stories doing that. What matters is the story and making it a good one. I hope these tips help you get a better baseline of what you should be doing with the stories that you write. If you have any questions, I welcome comments down below in the comment area. And don't forget to hit that like button if you did enjoy this video. It does help to make other people be able to see this video in the search engine. I hope that you subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell so that you can get notified of when I come out with a new video. I'm coming out with new videos all the time, and most of them are in relation to the writing process. I'm going to be creating a video very soon about submitting manuscripts to different magazines and forums so that you can get paid for your short stories. I'm also going to be doing some videos as far as word counts goes for those that do want to have some assistance in upping their word count. As I said before, I can pump out a lot of words per day, and it's taken me a while to get to the point that I'm at right now. I used to only do 250 to 500 words per day, and now I'm up to 6,000 or 7,000. My highest day was about 11,000 words once, and I don't want to do that again. It tore me up for about 3 days afterwards, and I couldn't get much of anything done. So again, the quantity isn't really what's necessary. It's the quality of the words. Make sure you guys share this content so that your fellow authors can get some education as far as things that might help them out with being able to up their writing game. And yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. I, again, have published many books and many short stories. You can find all of my stories on my website at originalworlds.com. I do hope that you guys will go and check that out. I do have a newsletter there as well. We were talking about newsletters before, right? I do have a newsletter as well. And if you do sign up for my newsletter, you get a free book. My book Penitence comes free with just signing up for my newsletter. Doesn't cost you anything at all. And most of the time with my newsletter, you won't even see anything as far as sales goes. I actually just put out content. I put out free stories that I don't put anywhere else. It just goes into my newsletter. That's one of the reasons why I write as many short stories as I do. So I hope that you guys will go and sign up for that. Again, thank you so much for being here today, and I hope that this has helped you out. And if you have any comments or questions or concerns, make sure you let me know below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you again later.
Thanks for your visit. Have a nice day.
For more stories from Ira Robinson, go to his official website, originalworlds.com. At that website, you'll find free stories, free chapters from his books, writing information for those up-and-coming authors, and much, much more. That's originalworlds.com. Thank you for listening.